This is Chris Hoy. Thank you for joining me on Create with Chris. Today I will be sharing how to take a simple, adorable door hanger like this, add magical decorative touches like this to take it to the next level of awesomeness. So even though the painting may look complicated, simple techniques make this a project that anyone can create. Everything I use is listed in the links below, including surface, pattern, and supplies. So, whether you are a beginner or painting for fun, this is quick, easy, and impressive. Let's get started. The round MDF circle has been prepped with a multi-purpose sealer and lightly sanded and base coated with Portobello. I've loaded my 3/4 inch wash with thinned black plum, and I'm using the sides and just doing a slip slap application of the paints, very thin. I want to show a lot of movement. So instead of one heavy coat, just give it 2 light coats. Just really gives that kind of eerie Halloween effect. Going around the outer edge at this point with a 3/4 inch angle to darken the edges with a shading of soft black, keeping this background very subtle and dark and Halloween-like. Blending it in with a 3/4 inch wash just to make sure those blend well. The pumpkin sections I did base coat with warm sunset, golden sunset, using the 3/4 inch wash, and then I'm taking Canyon Orange, following the direction of the pumpkin and just stroking that on. If you look closely, you'll see there's still some brush marks, but that will just look like pumpkin striations. It really works with this project very well. So trying to get a solid base coat is not important at all. Going around the outer edge with red spice to deepen and shade along the outer edges and the bottom, just kind of pulling it up, soften it down. It looks kind of messy, but I go back and just blend it in. My paint is so very thin. It's super easy to move it around and play with it. Make sure that paint's not heavy and dark. It's just a real fun way to get color on there without having to work super hard. I did bump down to my 1/2 inch angle for the smaller areas just for more control. The pumpkin stem is Portobello, and now I'm just taking a little bit of black plum on my 1/2 inch angle, and I'm working between shading it and then I jump on the toe to kind of pull up those long lines. Thin down some bleach sand using my Epic script liner to stroke on some messy curved ridge marks. And now I'm going back with my number 2 Radical Round with more black plum just to enhance those valleys and not being fussy, just adding layers. It all works together really well because it's not heavy paint. A little bit of soft black to shade the bottom and up the ridges just a touch with the 1/2 inch angle. And overall you get that look of nice ridges. Going back with a little bit of Snow White, and it's thin, but I just want to really touch up those highlights and bring a lot of sparkle to that pumpkin stem. You don't have a lot of paint, just put it on in small touches. Going back with Heritage Brick to deepen that shading, and then again with Black Plum. And I did speed this up because it's just basic floating and shading at this point. Most of the shading of the black plum is on the bottom and the right side. That just gives a little more direction on the focal highlights, the light direction. Now I did paint the eyes and the mouth black plum, but then I decided it was too dark, so I painted them Canyon Orange and went over it with a wash of black plum. That lets a little bit of that orange glow through. Doesn't look so solid and heavy. This gives more of that eerie pumpkin effect. And I'm using my 3/4 inch oval wash. Love that brush. It has soft bristles It's really easy to apply the paint and you don't end up with brush lines or brush strokes. And it was a little bit light, so I just went back after I dried it and put on a second very, very light layer of paint. I want them to be dark, but not solid and heavy dark. I painted the center of the eyes with Aqua Sky, and I'm just using my number 5 Radical Round to get a nice solid coverage on that. And it is a solid coverage, 2 coats, at least 2 coats of the Aqua Sky. Spending a little more time on the eyes to make sure that they're really going to stand out. Going back with a little bit of Snow White, I'm floating a highlight, bump down to my 1/4 inch Awesome Angle. The highlight's going to be in the bottom and up the right side. Make sure the eyes are facing the right direction so you get the shading or the highlights in the same direction. Once that is dry, I'm going to go in with a little bit of Black Plum. I'm just going to deepen the top and the left sides of the eye. Just going to give a little more dimension and roundness to the eyes. And I think it's very important whenever you paint anything with a face, especially with the eyes, that you spend a fair amount of time making sure the eyes really stand out, because that's the area that everyone focuses on when they look at your design. Going with my Painter's Pal, and I'm using it as a template to stencil those pupils soft black, and I want that to be nice and dark. And give that a quick dry. You may need to go back and add a couple layers of the highlight. I brightened up the blue area with a little Snow White and then put a little bit of a float in the pupils as well. And as always, you need to add that dip dot of Snow White to bring that real sparkle in there. Painting the edge of the eye, and I just eyeballed this to get a nice edge on it using my number 5 Radical Round. That's going to look like that cut edge side of the pumpkin. Painting it with Canyon Orange, and I want that to really stand out, so I'm going back with some Golden Sunset and just to brighten that up and put a little bit of Aqua Sky on there. The blue makes such a big difference whenever I'm going to pull the blue through the whole pumpkin, the whole design. I thought that edge should be just a little bit brighter, so I picked up some Snow White on my Epic script liner, and I'm using the side edge of the barrel on the bristles, just kind of rolling it over the outer edge, just to add a little bright edging to that. Brighten those side edges with a little touch of Snow White. And remember, we only put a couple coats of that Black Plum over that orange in the background. I'm floating soft black right around the edge of the eyeball and then around the center eye. Just helps them to stand out a little bit more. We really want those eyes to pop. And I bumped down to my 1/4 inch Awesome Angle. If you're not familiar with my angle brushes, I did a video a couple weeks ago to explain just exactly what makes them so awesome. So make sure you watch my videos and find out why my signature brushes are something every painter needs to have. Now I want the mouth and the nose to have just a little bit of that edging on it too. I thought I would do the tooth, but it didn't look good, so I just stuck with that one little corner of the mouth. Sometimes too much is too much. Put a little bit of Golden Sunset on that to help make it stand out. And of course, add a little bit of that Aqua Sky to make sure they all pull together and look fantastic. A little bit of Snow White to brighten that up. Finish it all up with a shade of soft black around the bottom edges and the side edges. This is a good way to clean up those edges too if there's any of that side that's not as straight as you'd like it to be. Adding just that hint of white brightness along the side edge. I did line those eyebrows with soft black using my Epic script liner. Now I'm floating a little bit of red spice below the eyebrows just to give a little dimension. I'm going to edge that top side of the eyebrows with a really light float of Snow White. Put everything in place just to make sure the placement is good. See if there's any places that need touched up. A little more shading. I deepened that with some Heritage Brick. Floating around the mouth with Heritage Brick, and this is a very loose float, but I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One is for placement, and then I take my white chalk pencil, and then I know exactly where to paint those teeth in. It's a perfect way to get that shape on there without having to trace it all out and cover it up. Just using a large number, I think this is a 1/2 inch wash or a number 10 flat, just to paint those teeth in. I'm using warm white because it's just a little bit more opaque than Snow White. It's going to take less coverage. Put this mouth on there to make sure I don't have any void areas where his teeth are supposed to be. So I'm painting them a little bit larger than the space, so I know that there's not going to be any empty areas. And that looks pretty good. Now that those are in place, I can go back with a little bit of shading and highlighting. Soft black, I'm just kind of pulling it across the base of the teeth and then just using the toe of my brush just to encourage some of it to go up into his teeth. Gives a little more age to those old teeth. Deepening that shading around the mouth. I did darken the bottom side with a little bit of black plum just to add a little more strength to that bottom shading. Brightening up the tips of the teeth with Snow White. I did go back with a little bit of Canyon Orange, and I don't know if you can see, but I traced around the pumpkin so I knew where the placement would be, and I just slap a little bit of that Canyon Orange on there. I thought it might give it an eerie glow. I wasn't really sure when I first did it, but after it dried, it looked pretty good. You'll notice the letters. We'll talk about those letters later. I wasn't crazy. I painted them like I did on the edges of the eye, but I wasn't crazy about them. So we'll do that later. The spider is Portobello, and I've just taken soft black and my 1/2 inch angle and very loosely shaded it. The little spider web is warm white with a hint of soft black down the right side. What's nice about the spider, and this is Aqua Sky I'm putting on now, it can be kind of messy and it makes it work even more. So I'm just going back. My motto, a little bit of paint makes a big difference. I'm toggling between the shading and the highlights. A little bit of Snow White highlights, a little bit of soft black shading, going back with some Aqua Sky just to add a little hint of color, and just building it up so that it's not one solid paint and one solid shade and highlight. I dip dotted the eyes, but you get that big mound of paint, so I use the handle end of my brush to lift that excess paint out, and that way it doesn't take it nearly as long to dry. Plus, it makes it easier to, it's a flatter surface. Taking soft black, sorry, I'm moving it all over the place. Shading around the eyes, I want those to be recessed in his head, and adding that dip dot of snow or soft black. And even though I added the highlights, they always dry a little bit lighter. Then you can really see where you need to enhance those and really bring those. He has to have those angry eyebrows. But allow the paint to dry before you go back and add stronger highlights until you know exactly what you need. Thinking the right side's a little bit darker, so I'm going to let that left side be a tad bit brighter. And it's just a back and forth between the shading and highlighting. It's so much fun. Dim those eyes down with a little float of soft black, and look what a difference that makes. It just looks fantastic. I'm using the stencil to create a very subtle stenciled background. I've loaded my Spectacular stencil brush with Aqua Sky, wiped probably almost all of the paint off, and you can see what a soft, beautiful, almost looks like an airbrush design. I didn't want the flowers, so I'm stenciling around the flowers, just shifting the stencil around. What's super nice about a stencil like this, it doesn't have to be perfectly overlapped. It's just a design in the background. Allow it to be super soft, super quiet, and it's just going to look fantastic. If you have any open areas, you can go back and just pick a part of the stencil and drop it in there. And usually it works out really well. Love this stencil. Absolutely beautiful. And it works for elegant designs as well as eerie Halloween designs. Make sure you keep those two holes, hang holes at the top in the right place. And I hadn't decided whether I wanted to bump those side pieces out or whether I want them tight against the pumpkin. So you can make a decision on that. Decided to bring a little bit of those aqua blue uh, shading low lights into the stem and then also on the pumpkin. Really makes a big difference, that little bit of paint. Just don't overdo it or get it too strong. I did go back and repaint the letters sunset gold. The color I had them just wasn't working on that dark background. And I decided I would just go back to the pumpkin colors and coordinate it with that. Sunset gold, I'm going to top coat it with a little bit of Canyon orange. And then it's going to blend in really nicely or coordinate really nicely with the pumpkin. But I wanted to make sure that it had a little bit of personality as well. So I'm just putting a light coat on. It's not solid and heavy. That sunset gold beneath is going to allow that Canyon orange to really glow. To add extra glow to that, I'm going to deepen the top and the bottom with a little bit of the red spice. I'm going to do that on both letters, make sure they match up. Pull a little bit up and down. And that allows that middle section to be a little bit brighter. And I did let that sort of dry before I went back and blended it. It makes it a little bit easier to work with. Using my number 5 Radical Round, well, we'll deepen that with a little bit of Heritage Brick. I forgot I added that on there. But look how it's starting to get a lot of dimension to it. Just a really great way to do letters, whether you stencil them or paint them or using cutouts for letters. It really adds a lot of personality. Now I'm going back with my number 5 Radical Round. I have a little bit of that Golden Sunset, basically dry brushing that on there. I don't want it strong. I don't want a heavy float. Just want it to brighten up. Touch of that Aqua Sky just on the top of that letter just to bring that color back in. Did not like it, so I wiped it off. These are things you find out as you paint along. Don't be afraid to try something new. And sometimes you get your best results with playing around. A little bit of Snow White dry brush in the middle. What a difference those letters made. Using my Epic Script Liner and Portobello to paint those curling vines and then a little bit of Snow White to brighten that up. Needs a little more design in there. Darken that down with some of the Black Plum. And what's nice, Black Plum's in the background, so you don't have to be super careful because it all works together. That just adds a little more design. Went back with Snow White to really brighten up some of those areas on the vine. And they will drop just a little bit darker, but just adds that extra highlight. I did decide to add an extra vine on there just to balance it out and give it a little more interest. And just take a look at it and make sure that the highlights are good. Since I have a spider, I decided that it needed to have a spider web. So I just kind of lined the spider web from the stem placement, and then I painted it with my Epic script liner and warm white. Shaded both sides of the ribs with black plum, since that will match the background. Then going back to highlight the center of each one of those ribs with Snow White. I am going back now with my number 5 Radical Round, just dry brushing Snow White highlights. And you can see I do them everywhere, and then I just keep increasing it until it looks balanced and even. After I glued everything in place, I decided to add another spider web on the letters HI. I think it adds a lot. And I did glue the eye so that the legs of the spider kind of projected past the outside edge of the plaque. I thought that helped make him stand out a little bit more since he was very similar to the background. So I hope you had fun with this project. Let me know if you have any comments or questions. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. That helps me out, and then you won't miss any upcoming videos. Be sure to check out my other videos. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together.